This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. Broadcasting live from Studio A, high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. It's a link to your instructors on the website, USAPREPARES.com. Converging threats are confronted daily by your instructors. I am Vincent Finelli. Alex is at the controls producing the broadcast at the world headquarters of Genesis Communications Network in Minnesota. What a meetup we had last night. Wow. Wow, John Reagan was on stage, and for hours he discussed the financial state of the union. Not a smile in the entire restaurant. The information was riveting, and that's what we're going to talk about right here for 2 hours this morning. Welcome, John Reagan.
Hey, this is your captain speaking. I recommend you fasten your seatbelts and keep your tray tables up and locked. It's going to be an interesting ride.
JR, I'll tell you what, last night you kept us pretty late. You really did. I didn't get home until after midnight last night, and we start at 5:30. Wow. Well, nonstop information, and as a matter of fact, you could have gone on for a couple more hours, easily. So what we're going to talk about today, class, John Reagan wrote a book. It's called The Financial State of the Union. And it's going to be available very shortly on Amazon. And, John, you're submitting it to the Library of Congress, right?
That's right. It's one of those things where when you do a print edition of a book, you have to, if you want it to go into the Library of Congress collection, you have to submit it to them before it's published. And it takes at least a week or two, because after all, it is the Library of Congress, for them to act and turn around and give you a number. Doesn't guarantee the book will go into the library, but it's the procedures you have to follow in case they do accept it.
Okay. All right. By the way, I think you have a bandwidth issue on your end, so if there's anything you can do to minimize that, that'd be appreciated. Okay, so, John, why don't we do this? Why don't we take the first few minutes and let's get to know our instructor, John Reagan. And you said this is your captain speaking, and there's a reason why you said that, right?
Yes. After college, the first 8.5 years of my professional life was spent as an Air Force officer. The first 6 years of those 8.5 were basically at a top secret level, although the most I typically saw was secret. And I was doing things that in the Air Force we'd call war planning. In the civilian world, you'd call it business continuity planning. And then my last assignment was at the Pentagon working on the nuclear planning system. And as a captain there, I had to get my clearance enhanced, so I lived in the above top secret world for the last couple of years and learned a little bit more than I wanted to about how our government actually works. And I would allow people that are holding positions in our government are violating their oath of office, the same one I took to protect and defend our Constitution. And as a captain sitting in the basement of the Pentagon, there really wasn't that much I could do about it. So I had to make a decision. Do I just keep on, selling my soul and not being able to do anything, or do I resign and see what I can do? And ultimately, this is what led me here. And the financial state of the union was a journey for me, because I had followed how things were going and knew things were not good before the collapse happened in 2008. And as part of that journey, I ended up going back to school, getting a second master's degree. This one was in finance. And part of that reason was, if there was an answer to our situation, I figured I'd find it in that degree. And unfortunately, not only did I not find the answer, I found out things that were even worse than what I thought they were. And through this journey, I figured one of the better ways of relating it is to turn it into a journey in the financial state of the union and act as your tour guide and being your captain on that tour.
And John, the title of your book is The Financial State of the Union, subtitle, Unspinning the Spin, Revealing the Position We're In. Now, last night you talked about that, and you talked about how serious it is. And the bottom line that after you described how we got where we are, and those numbers involved in showing us where we are, you made the statement that there's only one outcome. There's only one outcome that's possible as a result of this. Mathematically, there's only one answer. Would you share that with us now, and then we'll talk about why you say that?
Well, I do ask people, if you have a solution, please let me know, because I think it's your civic duty. Otherwise, there is just no way to avoid a financial collapse.
John, I'll tell you what, you're breaking up, and you know this kind of stuff always happens when we get into really serious topics, class. Either I get knocked off the air, and it has nothing to do with Genesis. It has to do with, I think somebody is sitting between where I am and where our digital signal goes. This happens whenever we get into really, really serious topics, and I'm quite flattered. I'm quite flattered, but you'll have to say that again, John, because you broke up.
Okay. Well, like I say, I always ask people, if you have a solution, please let me know, because I think that's your civic duty. And everything that I see just points to one possibility, and that is financial collapse.
Okay, and that's what you said last night. Okay, so John, let's start with. You want to start with the last 38 years, and you want to compare that with the next 38 years. Would you like to go there today?
Sure. One of the things that goes on is every year the trustees for Social Security and Medicare release a report, and they include a table for what they say their projections are going to be for the next 75 years. These include inflation, the average wages, GDP, among other things. And I had gone through and looked at where things are, or where things were for the last 38 years, and chose that time frame for two reasons. One, 38 is as close as you can get to half of 75. And two, I wanted to start a little bit after the time frame when President Nixon took us off the gold standard, which happened in 1. And so starting in 73 kind of just gives us a good starting point, taking into account the effects of that decision. So when we look we call 1973 our base year for using the official Consumer Price Index, the CPI. And back in 73, the average wages was a bit over $7,500 a year. And our total economy at that time was just under $1.4 trillion. In 2011, 38 years later, our economy had grown to roughly $15 trillion. Overall, that was about an 11 times increase. During that same time frame, wages went up about 5 2/3 times, and inflation prices went up 5 times officially. So if we adjust the wages and the GDP for inflation, the average wages come out ahead 12% over a 38-year period. That's not a whole heck of a lot. I mean, 12% divided by 38, you're talking, roughly 1/3% a year as far as an increase in real terms. GDP fared a bit better at about just a little over 2 times. So part of that has to deal with that during that same 38 years, if you remember, how much automation took over in our economy. So productivity increased, which is part of what bumped that number up. That's what really, really happened. When we turn to the report, trustees report, and we look at 2011 as our base year, and we go forward 38 years, 39, they say our consumer price goes from a level of 98 to 268. Average wages in 2011 are roughly 43,000. By 49, the average wage is going to be almost $1,000, which means all of us are going to be rich, according to this administration. And GDP goes to 86 trillion.
John, hold that thought. Hold that thought, and let's see if we can clear up some of the dropouts that we're having and the distortion that we're having on this digital signal. It's on your end. I checked on my end. It's not between me and GCN. It's between you and GCN. So let's see what we can do about that. Close any apps that you got. I'm Vin Finelli. This is USAPrepares.com. Hard-hitting information about the financial state of the union. John Reagan's with us. John Reagan, U.S. Air Force captain. John Reagan has written a book called The Financial State of the Union, Unspinning the Spin, revealing the position we're in. And last night, John was on stage at the meetup. John, I'll tell you, you held everybody's interest for hours. Absolutely. You did your presentation with PowerPoint, and you did some charts and graphs, and it was very, very succinct how you explained the mess that we're in, and we're not getting out of it. And John, we were talking about some of the things that are happening, like Ben Bernanke. He's trying to get out of the way. He's one of the engineers of this mess. Of course, Alan Greenspan was involved. It's taken a lot of politicians to sell their souls to get us to this point. And you're comparing the last 38 years to the next 38 years. So let's continue, please.
And these are the numbers that people in Congress use for their budget projections as well. So if these numbers are off, everything that they're telling you is going to be off as well. And I know these numbers are kind of hard to follow. You're in front of a computer, you can go to the financialstateoftheunion.com, and underneath the book tab, you'll find the book 1 links and images, and that has all of the images because the Kindle version, Kindle screen is fairly small. These images be hard to read, and the paperback is going to be 6x9. Again, fairly small, so some of these images are hard to read. So I put all of the images on the web so that you can read them, along with all the links from where the information came from. So you don't have to take my word for the numbers. You can go check it out yourself. And we were talking about coming up in the next 38 years. They tell us by 2049, average wages are going to be roughly $195,000 a year, and our whole economy is going to be about $86.5 trillion. To put that into times, that inflation goes up basically 2 3/4 times, they say, over the next years. Well, the last 38 years, 5 times. So they're saying that for the next years, inflation is going to be roughly half what it was for the last 38 years. And that's in spite of printing a record amount of money. When the crisis started, the Fed had about $800 billion worth of Federal Reserve notes on its balance sheet. They have increased that to over $3 trillion now. That's more than tripling the amount of money. And once that hits the economy, it can't help but cause inflation to go wild. They say wages are going to go up 4.5 times. The last 38 years went up 5.6, so according to their own numbers, they're saying wages are not going to go up as fast as they used to. And GDP increases about 5 3/4 times. When we adjust that for inflation, they say the next 38 years, wages actually go up in real terms 65% because of the low inflation rate, and that GDP basically doubles. But if you just go and say inflation is only as bad as it has been for the last 38 years, which is 5.07, and you adjust these numbers for inflation, the average wages actually drop 11%, and GDP barely budged, increasing just 13%. That is staggering, the difference in what they say things are going to be versus what things were in the past. Of why they think they can perform this magic.
John, last night we were talking about inflation. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about inflation. Would you see if you can reconnect, and let's see if we can get some of this distortion out of the signal from you to Genesis. Okay? I'm Vin Finelli. I'd like to talk about inflation, and we're going to tell you what you can expect. It's not pretty. You're not going to like it, but you need to know it. When we come back, right here, USA Prepares. Class, have you noticed that commercials and broadcasters are starting to say harder and harder hitting words about your government and the people in the White House? They're using words like government minions, Obama's minions, traitors, treason. Yeah. And I guess you shouldn't be surprised, should you? People are actually saying what they feel. John Reagan's with us. We're talking about the financial state of the union. We're talking about what to expect and why. And John, last night, we were talking about the inflation numbers, and I asked you publicly, based on the numbers that you were talking about, and I know that we're a little early in this on this broadcast, but what do you expect us to see as an inflation percentage going forward? And it was staggering. Would you like to share that with us?
Yeah, sure. As I said, the Federal Reserve went from $800 billion to over $3 trillion on their balance sheet. if all of that cash makes it into the economy, a bit over 3 times what we used to have. So that'd be somewhere between about a 200 to 300% inflation rate.
Okay. And would that be over a period of a year or 18 months or what? What would you expect? When will this cash infusion, quantitative easing, be seen? How long will it take to work its way through the system?
That's a good question. Part of that depends on how fast they let it out. But we've also got another factor in play, too, and that is that right now the dollar is the reserve currency of the world, and countries are doing everything they can as quickly as possible to make something else the reserve currency. And there are literally, trillions of dollars out there that were never expected to come back to America, that people in other countries are using as, a secondary currency. Well, for years I've been reading where other countries, where the dollar used to be, gladly accepted, you have a very hard time getting people to take dollars. And as the dollar falls more and more out of favor, those dollars are going to start returning to America. And when those return, that's going to have a negative effect, which would also be an increase in the inflation rate. And typically, when we've seen this happen with other countries, it starts off with some kind of double-digit inflation. If it gets into the critical mode, that's where you start getting the triple-digit and higher inflation rates. The thing is, we're in totally uncharted territory now, because never in history have we had a total global fiat currency-based economy. And when you're talking about the way things were, the dollar being the reserve currency, when the dollar goes, that's going to affect everything worldwide.
Mike Ma mentioned when he was up here last. He's from Guatemala. He's a senior USA Preparedness.com instructor class, and he teaches how to negotiate for your life, how to bribe for your life, and he's been in every kind of bad situation you can think of. And he mentioned publicly that in Guatemala, the maximum amount of Federal Reserve notes that anyone would accept there is 500. They don't want to be the last one holding $500 worth of Federal Reserve notes. They don't want to hold them because they're afraid they're going to get stuck with them. So that's happening in a third world country, Guatemala, right now. Yeah, please continue, John.
Well, I know it's somewhat painful trying to go through some of these numbers, but we have to go through this process to understand how they're misrepresenting what's going on. They are using overly optimistic numbers, saying that inflation is not going to be as bad, which means that they are understating what the expenses are going to be. And they are also overstating what their income is going to be. So we're going to have higher expenses, lower income, which means all their projections are going to be off. Using their overly optimistic projections, the unfunded liabilities of our social insurance programs, which currently is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, is in the neighborhood of something north of $120 trillion. This is not what we need to pay in the future. This is what we would need in the bank today, earning interest in order to meet the future obligations that we've already promised to pay. For every year that we don't have that money in the bank, we're at least losing the interest that those funds would have earned. So if you use just a 5% rate, which is the lowest I've ever seen it go up in a year, 5% of 120 trillion is $6 trillion. Compare that to a stated, basically $1 trillion deficit. That means our real deficit per year is a minimum of $7 trillion. There's a professor from Boston University, Professor Kotlikoff, that uses the alternative from the Congressional Budget Office, which has slightly more realistic numbers. His projection has an increase of the unfunded liabilities going from 211 trillion to 222 trillion. That's an $11 trillion increase in 1 year. And this is where we start turning into looking at exactly how much money can the government bring in order to cover what they've promised. And in doing this research, I came across the IRS tax stats, and there's links on the link page there for the personal and business stats. The most recent complete years is 2008 for business income and 2010 for personal income. So if you actually go into those spreadsheets and look at it, 2008 total net business income was $1.8 trillion. From 2010, total personal income was $8.3 trillion. Now, there's a little bit of overlap there because the way partnerships and S-corps and sole proprietorships are reported, they're not reported on the corporate returns. They're reported on the personal returns. So we have to back those out so we're not double counting. And likewise, any dividends paid by corporations have to come out of their income. So I back that out so we're not double counting dividend income. So when you do that, that leaves a grand total of $9.1 trillion total income in the United States. So even if we taxed 100% of income, and let's just assume that it's grown a little bit from 2010 to 2012, let's just say we've got $10 trillion we can tax. Tax 100% of that. Let's look at what we've got. We have just the unfunded liabilities using realistic estimates going up 11 trillion a year. Right there, we can't even meet the annual increase for the social insurance programs. We also have government at all levels spending now $6.6 trillion a year, federal, state, and local. So if we told federal, state, and local, no more borrowing, no more printing, and they just have to live off taxes with a balanced budget, that alone would take 2/3 of our income. 67% tax rate, no exclusions, no deductions. Everybody pays 2/3 of what they make. It's just simply not sustainable. In addition to that, the government's not the only one in debt. Total debt for the United States is nearly $60 trillion. That includes government debt, business debt, private debt. Interest on that, even at today's historically low interest rates, is over $3 trillion a year. There's just not enough money being made to support what we've gotten ourselves into.
John, last night a point came up. One of the class at the meetup, Ken Hurley, one of our instructors, asked the question. He said 67% tax. Some are paying 67% tax right now. Some might even be paying more. And he's absolutely correct. But what you came back with was an astonishing statement. You said, yeah, that's correct. However, everyone would have to pay 67%. And that's not what's happening. Not everyone is paying. Now, I'm certainly not advocating that we all pay 67%. I don't like paying even 10%. I don't like it because I know the government's wasting every bit of it. The bottom line, that's my opinion, the bottom line is, John, it's not sustainable. It absolutely isn't sustainable. If everyone were to pay 67%, which is the number that you came up with that would be required just to keep us even, people would lose their houses, their cars, their business, everything. They'd lose everything because they don't have it. They frankly don't have it. John Reagan's with us, the financial state of the union, unspinning the spin, revealing the position we're in. His book is going to be available, I guess, in about 2 weeks. And you'll be able to pre-order it and get it autographed at the Expo, July 19, 20, and 21. John Reagan and I are talking about the financial state of the union. John Reagan, Bernie Madoff was arrested, tried, and imprisoned for creating a Ponzi scheme. Is there a substantial difference between what Bernie Madoff did and what we've done with Social Security? Aren't they both Ponzi schemes?
Well, Bernie is an amateur. Congress are professionals. Yeah, they are professionals, and I believe we've been conned because back in the 1980s, 1970s, 1980s, I learned that Social Security was going to be insolvent very, very quickly, if not at that point in time. And that was a long time ago. And a lot of us who are my age, I'm 60, believe that it's not going to be around much longer because it's a Ponzi scheme. And I can't believe it. I can't believe that we've gotten to the point where our government lies about everything. Everything. If they say it, I naturally distrust it. It's almost, well, no, it's not almost. It is. It is at the point where if they say it, I don't believe it unless they can prove otherwise. I mean, they have to prove it to me now because I don't believe a thing they said. They said, we're not listening to your phone calls. They're listening to our phone calls. We're not monitoring your emails. They're monitoring our emails. The list goes on and on and on. They cannot tell the truth. And this is, John, am I wrong that the numbers that you have gone through have been misleading us for a very long time to the point where we are insolvent and have been for a long time? Some clarification. Apparently, I miscommunicated last night. That 67% tax rate, that only pays for current operations.
Yeah,
if you want to keep things from getting worse, which includes interest on our national debt, public and private, making sure that the unfunded liabilities do not get any worse, we would need a tax rate of 200%.
Well, that's not doable. The only way we can have a tax rate of 200% is to borrow so we could pay tax, which would just make it worse.
Well, I've got another solution for that. Total wages and salaries, $5.8 trillion a year. So we forced everyone to triple their current wage salaries and tax 100% of that. We could keep things from getting worse.
And it would bankrupt all the companies paying the wages. John, you're breaking up. I missed that last remark.
Minor detail.
Yeah. Ken Hurley had some really great questions last night, and I believe, and he's one of our instructors class, I believe that he was asking questions that everyone wanted to know the answers to. And one of the questions that he asked was a question that our son asked Bob Chapman, and we talked about this at the meetup last night. And the question was kind of like this. What happened? What happened to the American family whereby dad used to go to work? And we're talking in the 1950s and the 1960s. Dad would go to work, mom would stay home. Dad would be able to provide an income that would enable the family to have a car and a house, food, heat, electricity, be able to go to the doctors, all the things that were needed, not necessarily wanted, but needed. And it all worked. And the family was a unit. After that, what happened? What happened to cause the disintegration of the family and to make almost everybody broke? And when we come back, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what happened with John Reagan. John Reagan, he's the author of The Financial State of the Union, Unspinning the Spin, Revealing the Position We're in. We'll be back right after the top of the hour commercials and announcements. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? This is hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. John Reagan's with us, and we're talking about the Financial State of the Union, Unspinning the Spin, Revealing the Position We're in. And at the last hour, we were talking about something that happened, our perception of what happened from the 1950s and 60s to today in the family. But first, I'd like to mention this. At the top of the hour news, John Reagan, you and I both heard the economy's improving and there's more, the consumer is more confident. That's crazy. I don't know anybody who's more confident in the economy. Do you?
Somebody's smoking something.
Yeah. Not where we live. There is no one that I can, no one is more confident in the economy because it's improving. It is not improving. We are going down the drain. Absolutely, and that's what this broadcast is about. We're delineating what the causes are and where we're headed. We are in collapse mode. And, John, the question that we were talking about from Ken Hurley, previous hour, was at last night's meetup, we were talking about the 1950s and 1960s, and he said, what happened? Because Dad used to be able to provide for the family. Mom, the mother of the family, used to raise the children. Mom did not have to work. And so the children were well cared for. They weren't warehoused in daycare centers. They were actually raised by the parents. And it was a great life. It was just like Mayberry, Andy Griffith's Mayberry. And Bob Chapman had an answer to that, and I'd like your response. Bob Chapman said what happened was taxes and inflation. It's as simple as that. Tax rates kept going up and up and up and up, and inflation, another insidious taxation, theft of our wealth, kept going up and up and up. And the combination of those two were the dominant forces in causing Mom to have to go to work. Now, some people think it might be that we bought cell phones and we bought iPads and we bought, electronic paraphernalia, and that we had an ever-increasing thirst for more stuff. However, Bob Chapman said the greatest contributor to that was taxes and inflation. Your thoughts?
And the two go together as well. As inflation drops the value of the money and you have to earn just to buy the same amount of goods, you end up getting into a higher tax bracket. Another thing that happens is the capital gains taxes, which in many cases is simply a tax on inflation. So if you bought a house for $100,000, sold it for $200,000 without it making improvements to it, that $100,000 a lot of the time was simply due to inflation, not the actual value increasing. Mm-hmm. If you had to turn around, buy another house that was going to be $200,000, you really didn't make anything.
No, you're absolutely right. And, John, very few people have explained it, that capital gains is a tax on inflation. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. John, during the first hour, we were talking about Ben Bernanke and his injection of funds into the monetary system. Nowhere in any of the financial textbooks that I've studied when I was going to school back in the 1970s is there any mention of quantitative easing. That term is not in any of my textbooks. Is it in any of your master's degree textbooks?
I think it's possibly talked about when they say monodebt.
But I'm talking about the specific term quantitative easing.
No, never heard of it.
Yeah, okay. All right, John, would you like to talk about debt? Would you like to talk about, in your book, you talk about In Debt We Trust. Would you like to talk about how that has contributed to our problem?
Before I do that, though, let's talk about some current events here.
Okay.
In that over the last week, the Fed talked about we're going to see about cutting back on quantitative easing, and all of a sudden the markets got jittery, and it caused the bond yields to go up just a little bit, which started dropping prices on bonds. And the basic law on bonds is it's an inverse relationship. When interest rates go up, the value of bonds go down. When interest rates go down, the value of bonds go up. We are at historic lows on interest rates. The Fed's charging 0 to 0.25%. You can't get any lower than that. There is only one way to go, and that is up. When interest rates go up, the bond market is going to crash. There is no way for it to go but down. And especially with a weakened economy like we have, that type of crash is going to be very severe. And it also hurts the underfunded pensions out there, because them have significant investments in bonds, including government bonds. And when those bonds go down, that means these unfunded pensions are going to be even more unfunded. And with governments already not being able to tax enough to stay even, they're not going to be able to make up the difference in order to pay the promise made for these pensions.
So, John, what happens to an unfunded pension?
Well, we've got an example with state. They're in very serious shape, and they're saying, there's just lots of things out here we're not going to be able to afford, and one of those is pensions. So if you are counting a pension from the government, it may not exist at all, or you may get cut back significantly.
You're talking about a broken promise. You're talking about a broken contract. You're talking about a breach of trust at the highest level.
It's
at
like
the highest level.
If we try to avoid a financial collapse, it would take having to totally eliminate the Social Security and Medicaid programs, which just might give us enough wiggle room to get our ship astern. But if we the blowback, the civil unrest that would occur, and we've got examples of this over in Europe, Italy, Greece, Spain, just the little bit of austerity that they implement there, you look at all the riots they had. If we try to eliminate those programs, it would just tear the country apart.
Okay. I agree. I absolutely agree. As a matter of fact, I can't understand why we're so calm right now. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't understand. Boy, I probably shouldn't say this, but I guess I will. I don't understand why some of our Vietnam veterans, Agent Orange hasn't acted up. I don't understand it. I don't understand how they're just sitting back saying, yep, they sent me over there. I fought for this country. I fought for all the reasons that they said I should go over there. They had me in harm's way. I was taking incoming fire. I had to fight for my life. Yep, I was defending the United States just as they sent me over there, under all those lies. Okay, I did all that. I worked hard. I saved money. They're stealing it through inflation. They're stealing it through taxes. They've been lying to me about everything, including the cell phones, including the emails. They're snooping on everything. They want to know everything about me. I can't understand why some of those guys who've been through so much and who have sacrificed so much they've not said, that's it, and lost their tempers. I don't get it. I don't get it. I'm not asking anybody to do anything. I'm just saying I'm surprised. I'm just surprised that everyone is so calm about what's happening. It's unbelievable. John, it's unbelievable to me that teachers and parents will have a little bake sale where they'll sell cupcakes so they can partially fund a school trip at a public school, but yet they won't march en masse on City Hall to stop the poisoning of their children. I don't get it. I don't get why people aren't looking at the big picture. They're looking at the little picture. I know it's a little bit of a diversion, but last night behind the glass wall, there's like 8 televisions at Ziggy's. And I was looking at some of those screens. There is nonstop, high-speed entertainment to distract the American people. I could see all these different channels all running at the same time. And while you were speaking, I was counting the number of seconds per scene. The longest scene I was able to time was 4 seconds. There were 1 second scenes, 2 second scenes, 3 second scenes, and the longest scenes, and very few of them, at 4 seconds. We are being bombarded with these messages, and we are being driven off track so that we can't see the big picture. And I said this before. I think that James Gandolfini's death has been used by the media to keep us distracted from the big picture, what's really, really happening, the biggest scandals of the United States of America, the NSA, the spying, and the telephones. It's unbelievable. And all the companies that were involved in it. John, this is so big. The lies are so big. They involve Google, they involve Apple, they involve AT&T, they involve Verizon, all of this snooping. And then you add that to the lies with the misinformation, the lies of the numbers. It's unbelievable. How are these guys getting away with this? Let's talk about it when we come back. Let's talk more about the numbers and the mess we're in and how we're not going to be able to climb out of it. There's going to be a collapse. That's all there is to it, period. John Reagan, Ben Finelli. And you can meet John Reagan at the Expo, the Get Prepared Expo, July 19, 20, and 21, Lebanon, Missouri. Information on the website, usaprepares.com. Class, there's a surge in digital dementia. Digital dementia. Doctors in South Korea are reporting a surge in digital dementia. Young people have become so reliant on electronic devices they can hardly remember everyday details, such as their own phone number. No kidding. No kidding. We're surrounded. I can't think of a lot of good things. I really can't. I wish I could. John Reagan's going to be with us at the Get Prepared Expo. That is July 19. It's a Friday. That's the setup day, and we're going to have 2 seminars and a freeze-dry guy banquet meal. July 19th, Friday, in Lebanon, Missouri. Information's on the website. And then Saturday, July 20th, we're going to have seminars and the exhibits and a second banquet dinner. And then Sunday, July 21, in Lebanon, Missouri, at the Cowan Civic Center, you're going to see the exhibits and the seminars. So we're going to have lots of seminars. There'll be multiple seminars running at a time, probably 3 to 4 at a time. The last time we did it, we had 83 seminars. 43 states were represented. People from 43 states came to the Get Prepared Expo, the largest preparedness expo in the United States of America. And John Reagan was there, and he presented his seminars on what's happening economically in the United States of America. And he'll be with us again. He's always there. John Reagan is going to be teaching us about the financial state of the union, and you'll be able to ask him all the questions that you'd like. And as a matter of fact, you'll be hard-pressed to find a question about the financial state of the union that John Reagan cannot answer. You're going to be hard-pressed to find that question. And so he'll be able to tell you what his thoughts are, and he's working on a new book, The Unprepared Prepper. John, let's continue with our discussion about the financial state of the union.
Yes, you talked about, how do they get away with what they're doing? And I can sum that up in 3 words: bread and circuses. The same thing that happened with the Roman Empire, that so long as the population is fed, which food stamps are at record use, and they're entertained, and boy, do all kinds of ways of entertaining people nowadays, whether it's sports, games, TV, movies.
Obama phones. Yeah.
But if you keep the population fed and entertained, you can pretty much get away with anything. Now,
John, I was last night. I had a chance to look up at some of these monitors at Ziggy's, and I was very critical about what I was looking at. First of all, I was furious that had these silly things on TV anyway. But there was a program that was obviously a show about automobiles and classic automobiles and the people that built them, and they showed this outdoor area where there was kind of like an event, a car show, if you will. And they had all these cars there, and they acted like it was really fast scenes, 1 second, 2 second, 3 second scenes, and there was all kinds of computer graphics on the screen to distract you. But if you actually paid attention to the scenes of the outdoor event, there was hardly anybody there. In the background, you could see there was hardly anybody attending it. But they made it seem like, boy, I really missed a great event, But there was hardly anybody there. What I'm saying is they're even lying in the circuses. That's what I'm saying. They're lying through the media. It's unbelievable. It really makes me crazy. John, as a matter of fact, I don't know if you heard the discussion, but some of the people at the meetup want to start a boycott against media. They want to boycott media. They want to call people who are advertising and tell them they want certain programs back on the radio, and if they aren't put back on the radio, there are people in Springfield who are going to call advertisers and say, if you advertise on this particular station, we're not buying your products. We're going to stay away from you. We're boycotting you. What's happening is now the community is just starting to realize that guerrilla tactics can be used, the same tactics that the media used to silence the message. Well, those in Springfield want to reverse those tactics on the media and tell the media, hey, if you don't start putting decent programming on, we are going to boycott your advertisers. That will get their attention. Class, think about that. Think about that. John Reagan, Vin Finelli. John, let's talk about the numbers and what we're going to see and what we're going to feel and what's coming our way. When we come back. I'm Vin Finelli. John Reagan, USAPrepares.com. Class, you're going to get a chance to meet John Reagan at the Get Prepared Expo. And we're also going to do something that's never been done before. Never has this been done before at a Get Prepared Expo. We're going to have a seminar. Sam Bushman, Michael Evans, and I are going to be teaching a seminar on how to get started in radio. Sam Bushman is an expert. I'm learning, and Michael Evans has had his experiences with challenges. I mean, it's unbelievable. So we're going to talk about what to do, what not to do, and tactics that may help you. And here's why. We believe that getting prepared involves getting the message out. Okay? So if you have something to say and you think that radio is a place for you to do that, we're going to teach you some of what you need to know to get started in radio, how it works. How does radio work? We're going to teach you. We've all experienced, the three of us, Sam Bushman and Michael Evans and I, have gone through Knox University of Radio. And we're going to tell you how it works. We're also going to teach you tactics so that if you don't want to be on radio, but you'd like to call into talk show programs, how you can get in, what to tell the call screeners so you can get in and then get your message out. So we're going to start teaching guerrilla tactics because the other side is out of control. So we're going to use some of their tactics for our own survival. John Reagan's with us. John, can you share with us, one other thing. We're going to have 2 banquet dinners, one on Friday, one on Saturday. They're $8 a piece. Freeze-dry guy, survival banquet dinners. You're going to get a chance to meet your instructors. We are going to be introducing ourselves at the microphones, as we always do. It takes a couple hours. Each one of us might speak for about a minute. You'll get a chance to see how funny-looking we really are. and you'll get a chance to put a face behind that voice. So that's at the Get Prepared Expo, and information's on the website. John Reagan, what's it going to be like? What is the typical family going to see as a result of this financial mess that our politicians have created for us?
And I think that's kind of like I was wanting to segue in here, is that what does the financial State of the Union have to do with preparedness?
Yeah.
I want to just point out these are unprecedented times, and when things go south, it's going to hurt everything worldwide, and I don't see any way that the global supply chain is going to survive, because when people realize that these pieces of paper backed by imagination and their electronic equivalents are worthless, how are you going to exchange that for hard goods? Who's going to sell you oil for worthless pieces of paper? Who's sell you food for worthless pieces of paper? It's not going to happen. So the preparedness needs to be at the level where whatever you need from the supply chain, you need to have on hand. And that's why I wrote the Financial State of the Union. And while it is a financial report, it doesn't read like a financial report. I call it a nonfiction book with plot twists. In early reviewers, I've had people that normally read fiction say how entertaining it was. And it's designed so that you can see what the condition is without having to have a degree in finance. Now, there's 2 parts of the audience here. One are those that are basically part of our class here with USA Prepares, that understands that things are coming around in the world that we need to be prepared for, whether it's small disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes, or large disaster like financial collapse or an EMP attack. For that audience, I wanted to make sure that they understood there's no way out. We just plain don't have enough money to avoid a financial collapse. There's another audience out there that, if you're lucky, they follow TV news with the government saying everything's just hunky and dory. And at the same time, I think most people know something's not quite right with the economy. And with the Financial State of the Union, it lets them see what the situation is. Now, that tends to invoke a normal human response. When you see what the situation is, you now have a sense of loss because you don't get the future you're planning on having.
Right.
That grief response ends up being different for different people. It's just like when you lose a loved one. Everybody grieves differently. But you need to get realize that and get through that process as quickly as possible, accept it is what it is, so that you can make the best future you can make for yourself. And, part of the problem we have here is that in America we have a very, very poor financial education, even at the graduate level. And what I tried to do here is try and make up for some of that education and not dumb it down. Here it is the way it is. I'm not trying to take these humongous numbers that nobody can understand and turn it into, well, if this were a family, this would be what your budget is. We're just taking these raw numbers, which are now in the trillions, and just pretty much doing simple comparisons. And you can see that our income's, $10 trillion, and we need $20 trillion just to keep things from getting worse. It doesn't take a lot of thought to realize you can't do it.
You're absolutely right, John. And I'm really frustrated because our government has failed us at every level. There's nothing they get right. I mean, even if you strip out the lies, and I don't understand why they just can't tell the truth. What kind of people are involved in lying at such great levels, at such extraordinary lies, such big lies? Why do they feel that they have to listen to our phone calls, read our emails, build computers to store information about what we've done, our biometrics? Why do they have to put their hands down our pants when we fly? It's embarrassing to even think that our government would stoop to the levels. Just 1% of what they do is an embarrassment, a national embarrassment. And last night, John, I'm so frustrated. I think I hit one of my own buttons. Last night, we talked about a post that we have on our website. In Tennessee, if a person calls the water department and says, I got a problem with my water, it's coming out cloudy, I don't know. It doesn't seem right to me. What's going on with my water? The person that calls, that makes that phone call to the water department, can be charged with terrorism. Terrorism. It's upside down. It's inside out. It's backwards. The people involved in producing the cloudy water are the terrorists, not the person calling and saying, hey, my water's cloudy. What's going on? We're saying black is white, white is black, up is down, down is up. It's absolutely crazy. And people are listening to it and they're saying, oh, yeah, you're right. So that guy is probably a terrorist that called and complained about his water. Who does he think he is? Calling and complaining about his water. Everybody knows his water's safe because the government says it's safe. But that same government is the government that's poisoning men, women, and children with fluoride. John, so you're concerned. You wrote the book because you want to save some lives. I think it's admirable. I applaud you for it. I know that you've worked a long time on this book. I know you have, because I've been talking with you since you decided to write the book. And you've written it in a way, John, I believe I read the book in an hour. Is that what you would expect?
What I've been getting from my early reviewers is that it's fast-paced, it's entertaining, and it really does inform. Now,
Absolutely.
naturally, it does have to contain a few numbers, but I try to do everything that I could to make it as painless as possible for the people that kind of get that deer in the look eyes when they have to face numbers.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I wanted to make sure that this was an objective view of our position. You could verify each and every one of those numbers. So it's not just opinion, pulling a number out of thin air. And I give all the links to the sources on my website. There's a total of 34 links, and 29 of those links are directly to government or Federal Reserve sources. Don't like the numbers. They're not my numbers. They're the official numbers being presented to us. And I do go into why we might not want to accept them at face value. But it's taken step by step so that you can make your own mind up on which.
John, you asked Dr. Shealy to comment on the book, and your is that going to be on the back cover?
Yes, it is.
Do you remember what his quote was? Can you paraphrase it?
I remember the last of it is that everybody should buy this book and send a copy to their representative in Congress.
Yeah. Yep. It's if every Congress critter would spend just the 1 hour to read this book, they would have massive regrets about all the harm that they have done to the United States of America. And they just might begin a new course to fix some of the damage that they've done. John Reagan, Vin Finelli, USA Prepares. I am so glad that there's no video camera on me in the studio. And Lee Wickenhauser of Genesis suggested that we put a camera on so you guys can see what this is like. And I'm thinking, and I'm stomping around the studio here, just absolutely stunned by the enormity of these problems. All of them. All of them are man-made. And John Reagan's with us, and I was thinking, John, our son wanted to consider going to public school for high school. He had never been to school, so we talked to the public school, and they said, okay, now here's how the free and reduced lunch thing works. And I go, what? What are we talking about? Well, here, you just fill out this form, and you apply for a free or reduced lunch. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And they said, no, really, it'd be really good if you do that because it will help the school if your son gets a free or reduced lunch. I said, absolutely not. There's no way. And they didn't care if they were willing, they were encouraging us to make stuff up so we could get qualified for a free or a reduced cost lunch for our child. That's how far we have fallen. The school had a financial interest in having another person get on the free or reduced lunch program. We told them, stuff it. No, we weren't going to do it. John, that's what I'm talking about. We have gone mad. I was all scheduled to interview a teacher. She will not be on the air with us because she found out that her contract prohibits her from talking to the media. Okay? She was going to tell us that there's a school within 3 hours of this broadcast, where I am in my studio, that has 100% of the children on either free or reduced lunches. The entire school. How can that be? Nobody has enough money to pay for lunch? Oh. John, we've got a couple of minutes left.
Let me try and cheer you up. We talked about Bernie.
Good luck.
We talked about Bernie Madoff earlier. And
Yeah.
Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison for taking investors out of $18 billion.
Right.
So if we apply this to what Congress has done, in order to get the federal government straight between the unfunded liabilities and the actual debt, we'd need about $240 trillion. So if you get 150 years for $18 billion, that works out to about 2 million years in prison for what Congress has done.
That's for all of Congress, so you'd have to divide it by the number in Congress, right?
Well, if
And
they
give
diluted, I think they should get 2 million.
Yeah. Yeah. Racketeering. Hey, John, what's wrong with the RICO Act? These guys are racketeers.
But they exempted themselves. You don't expect them to live under the same laws that we have to follow.
Right. Right. Why should they? Why should they? What? They put their pants on differently, don't they? These guys are creeps. Do you know, I can talk about this now because I'm no longer on KWTO. There's a guy, Congress critter, named Billy Long. And you know, when he's on KWTO and he's talking about, on the radio about what all the good stuff he's doing in Washington, they don't take calls. They don't take calls because he would be eviscerated by the callers. Nobody would let him up for air. That's the kind of stuff that goes on. Listen, behind the scenes, radio, it's all engineered. It's all engineered. I'm talking about mainstream radio. I'm not talking about Genesis. I'm talking about mainstream radio. There's no reason to listen to mainstream radio. No kidding. I know for a fact that if you have $400, you can get your program on the radio. You can have the prostitutes hour, the bordello hour. Pretty much talk about anything you want as long as you don't say the 7 words. And you can pay for it and you can be on the radio. But at the Get Prepared Expo, we're going to teach you how to cut through that stuff and get your program on the radio. If you want more information, contact me through an email. usaprepares.com is the website. John Reagan's with us. He's going to be at the Get Prepared Expo. I'm all excited about John being at the expo. He gives a great seminar, standing room only. You're going to be impressed. John, thanks so much for being with us. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.